Good morning.
Morning, Rabbi.
Good morning. Good morning, Shmuel. How are you?
Baruch Hashem. We're in Israel now.
Okay.
Made it. Yeah.
Okay. How did you finally get there?
We flew to New York and we picked up the Marquia.
Okay. I'm glad you made it safe and sound.
Thank you.
Okay. So why don't we get started? We saw yesterday this very esoteric idea of the distance of the sun's trajectory is the amount of time that it would take to walk the distance um, the distance of the sun's trajectory from east to west over the course of a day is the amount of time that it would take for a person to walk for 500 years. And so what we said that was an astronomical amount. We had come up with the equation that the amount of time that it would take to walk 50 years was about 14,000 kilometers. So the amount of time that it takes to walk, so the distance for the amount of time that it takes to walk for 500 years would be 140,000 kilometers approximately. And we saw that the numbers are fairly accurate in that the diameter of the Earth is 12,000 kilometers. I forgot to ask Siri whether that diameter is measured latitudinally or longitudinally. Is it from the North Pole to the South Pole, or is it if you take a slice along the equator? So I'm not really sure. It makes a huge difference, but whatever. We also saw yesterday.
It'd be the same? Is this purpose?
No, it's not a perfect. The Earth is somewhat flatter at the poles than it is at the equator. That's because of the centrifugal force, by the way. But in any event, we saw therefore that the thickness of the rakia, according to this, remember this idea of the dome. The rakia is a dome, so that dome is 50 years walking distance. That's how thick it is. So it's the same. So Uchashem Sha'ovyo Shel Rakia Mahal Chamishim Shana, just like that's the distance of the Rakia, Kach Ovya Shel Eretz, that's the thickness of the earth, the diameter of the earth. Va'ovyo Shel Tehom, and when you go drill down below the earth, you get to the Tehom, the depths of water, and that's also a distance of the same, let's say, 14,000 kilometers or whatever. Mahalech Hamishim Shana, Uma Ta'am, and what's the basis of it? Hayoshev al Chug Haaretz, that God sits upon the globe of the earth, perhaps is one way of translating it. Uchasiv v'nemar v'chug shamayim yitalach, and it says that God traverses the globe of the skies, which is also a reference to the Rakia, Uchasiv b'chuko chug al pinei tahom. So we have another pasuk that uses the same word chug, either means orbit or it means surface. It's not really clear what that word means. On the face of the tahom. Ulamedim chug chug Ligazera. And therefore, since this word chug is used to describe all three, the thickness of the earth, the thickness of the rakia, and the thickness of the tahom, we know that all three have the same thickness, this distance that it takes 50 years to traverse. Now that we're talking about this thickness of the rakia and the trajectory of the sun, there is a similar idea that is in reference to the Eitz HaChaim, the tree of life. Now, before we get into this, we should point out that we're dealing with metaphor here, and we're also dealing with a symbolism of what these things represent. So whereas before we were dealing with astronomical calculations of distances, here we're now getting into the more esoteric, where when we talk about the size of the Eitz HaChaim, the tree of life that was in the Garden of Eden, we're no longer dealing with physical dimensions, we're dealing with spiritual dimensions. So let's see.
But with that, Rabbi, do we not believe the actual tree existed with the fruit? Like it was a physical thing?
Well, what do we know about the Garden of Eden? We don't know very much about it. There are, according to the Sifrei Kabbalah, it was a place, it still is a place, but was it here on the planet? Was it a different dimension of existence? Did it have the same corporeality as the world around us does? Or did all sublunar reality change as a result of Adam's sin? These are all questions that have to remain unresolved.
My childish mind thinks of it as a tree, a real tree in a real garden.
Well, it is a real tree, but it may not be the same kind of tree that you and I are used to. So Adam's existence in the garden may have been on a totally different plane of existence. We don't know because there are different accounts. There's certain medieval accounts that people did find the Garden of Eden somewhere in the Middle East at some point, and they confronted the flashing, flaming sword, and it zapped them, and they incinerated on the spot. Apparently it's the flaming, spinning sword that is described that got placed at the entrance of the Garden of Eden. Apparently, if you get too close to it, it shoots out flaming rays and incinerates you. That's the way it's described in a certain medieval work. But is that accurate? Do we know? I don't think so.
I know we say Adam's existence was different as well. Like he was translucent, his skin was not the same. So I guess that's the case. Then I guess the garden too may well have been different.
Yeah. So no one's ever found the actual garden. And we would think that by now with Google Earth, we would
Ask Siri.
Probably would have found the Garden of Eden. Okay. So Tanei Eitz HaChaim Mahale Chamesh Me'os Shana. It takes 500 years to walk the length and breadth of the tree of life. In other words, now think about that for a second. That certainly should be your indication that we're not dealing with a real physical tree, because if the whole thickness of the planet Earth is the distance of walking 50 years, how could a tree have that width of 10 times the span of the planet Earth?
And yet still
sit on the Earth and go undetected. Yeah, that's just
where is it?
Yeah. So that doesn't seem within reason. Amar Rebbe Yehuda beRebbe Eloi lo sof davar nofo ela afilu koraso. This is not just referring to the branches of the tree of life that spread out for 500 years walking distance, but it also is just referring, the trunk itself is 500 years. Meaning it takes 500 years to span just the trunk of the tree of life, and then the branches that go out in either direction are another 500 years each. That's the way it's being explained. Now, the Rambam in his Moreh Nevuchim actually cites this Yerushalmi, because it's also found in Bereshis Rabbah, but the Rambam was familiar with Talmud Yerushalmi, at least some of it, and he cites this Gemara. Let's finish the Gemara first, and then we'll talk about the Rambam in just a second. V'chol pilug mei Bereshis mispalgin mitachtav, and all of the bodies of water that are described in that very first chapter or second chapter of Genesis, which says that there were 4 rivers that intersected, they all met, they all converged at the foot of the tree of life, right underneath the tree of life. So because the Torah says, "V'nahar yotzei me'eden lahashkos hagan," that a river departed from Eden to irrigate the garden. So umisham yipared v'hayala arba arashim, and it split when it left the garden. It split into 4 tributaries, and then the Torah proceeds to describe the 4 tributaries: the Euphrates, the Tigris, etc. Okay, and umatam v'haya ke'et shasul al palgei mayim. In other words, where do you have an indication that the convergence of the 4 tributaries of water was underneath the Eitz HaChaim? As it says, "V'haya ke'et shasul al palgei mayim," that it shall be like a tree that is planted over palgei mayim, over different torrents of water. And so this is a reference to the tree of life. It refers to a person who is studying the Torah, because what is the verse? The verse is in Tehillim, Aleph Gimel, Ashrei Ha'adam Asher Lo Halach B'Atzas Rishayim. That fortunate is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, etc. But God is his protection. What's the whole language of the capital? Is Ki im b'tzoras Hashem chetzo u'v'tzoraso yehegeh yomam v'layla. Fortunate is the man whose whole desire is the Torah of God, and that he will study it day and night. What will be his fate? V'haya ke'et shasul al palgei mayim. He will be like the tree that rests upon all of the tributaries of water that emanate from it. So that's a reference to the Eitz HaChaim. Now that we have this reference and we see that we're talking about Torah knowledge, so what are we dealing with over here? Let's understand what this symbolism is. The trajectory of the sun is a 500-year walking span. What is that supposed to indicate? Sunlight, what is it indicative of? Illumination, elucidation, intellect, knowledge. That's the way the Rambam understands it. So he brings this Gemara without really explaining it, but clearly it is in a chapter. It's in the second section of the Moreh Nevuchim, chapter 30, where the Rambam is talking about how the story of creation and all of the rabbinic addenda to the story of creation is really a metaphor for how God imbues the universe with intellect to enable man to resemble God. Because for the Rambam, the one feature that man possesses that enables him to resemble God is his intellect. So God places the sun in the heavens in order to represent the trajectory of human knowledge over the course of a daytime. The sun rises, man starts to gain knowledge, and it peaks in mid-sky and then starts to decline until his sun sets. And it's not only the life of man, but it's also the intellectual life of man, his productivity and his creativity and so forth. Okay? So then when we think about what the Eitz HaChaim represents, the Eitz HaChaim represents the spiritual knowledge that man is capable of obtaining that God plants in this world. That's the tree of life. The source of all life is knowledge, but specifically divine knowledge that God shares with mankind. And therefore, it only makes sense that its span should be the same as the span of the motion of the sun, which represents that same kind of illumination. But that's the trunk of the tree. The branches represent, what would you say? Man's ability to spread forth that knowledge and extend that knowledge beyond what is granted to him by God, and to share that knowledge with others. So the branches represent the extensions of that divine knowledge that God imbues with the world, that man is able to build upon. And the water that flows from him is the Torah that he shares with others in the world, and that flows from the tree of life.
Could it also be generational?
Could be. There's plenty of things that you can build upon here.
I'm just thinking about Pesach and Seder and what the rabbi spoke about.
Yeah, sure. I'm not telling you exactly how to interpret it, but you have to find the correct references in the text that would indicate to you that it's cross-generational. All we see from this is that there's a certain extension that flows out of the tree of life, and the tree of life represents the ability for the human being to grasp knowledge in this world. Okay, so far so good. How are we doing with Talmud Yerushalmi so far? Okay, Tony, let's go.
It's not covered. I know we stopped making a one-for-one comparison a long time ago. Yeah. This whole offshoot, so to speak.
This discussion of the Eitz HaChaim is not in the Bavli, but it is in the Midrash. It's in Midrash Rabbah, in Bereshis Rabbah.
So the editors of Bavli chose not to put it in because it existed.
Yeah, we definitely know that it existed, and these are all brises. And there are many things that are not contained in the Bavli that are contained in Midrash and other rabbinic sources.
It was an editor's choice.
Yeah, it seems that way. Yeah. It would probably take 500 years walking distance to figure out, what editorial choices the rabbis made in each particular and why. Okay, Tani Bibraisa. Okay, so now we have a brisa that says, Eitz HaChaim hu echad mishishim legan, that the width of the tree of life, we said it's 500. The time it takes to traverse in the span of the walking distance of 500 years times 3. Now multiply that by 60, and you get the span of the garden that Adam was planted in. Okay. Vegan echad mishishim le'eden. And the garden was 1/60th of the breadth or the size of what's called Eden. Now here we're being introduced to a concept that even though we call the garden that man was resting in Gan Eden, but the Gemara is telling us that there are really 2 realms. There's Gan, and then there's Eden. I'm not sure if you've ever heard that concept before, but it means that Gan is of a lower spiritual level, and Eden is a higher spiritual level. The Gemara actually in the Bavli also discusses a series of things that are 1/60th of another. So the Gemara says that sleep is 1/60th of death, yes, and dreams are 1/60th of prophecy. Yeah, nevuah. Yeah, and so they're
fire.
The fire of this world is 1/60th of the fire of Gehenna.
And if we're studying meat and milk, the 1/60th.
Yes, right. And the 1/60th is not arbitrary. It's sort of trying to tell you that it's a minuscule amount. You only get like the slightest amount of semblance of it when compared to
less than that.
To the larger thing. So there are Kabbalistic texts that discuss how man is capable of, in the afterlife, man can ascend from the Gan up to Eden. In other words, Eden being the ultimate goal, even though the Gan is the first place you go after you die, Eden is the next step.
What's the exact translation of Gan and Eden?
Gan
Is a
is a garden. Eden is a place of pleasantry, like le'aden is to beautify. Yeah. La'aden et habasar means to beautify the skin. I think, where did we find that? I think we find it in various midrashim.
It's also a common name in Israel.
Eden,
Boys.
refinement.
Boy.
Eden is a boy?
We have a nephew named Aiden. That's what.
Oh, okay. I think it may be unisex, like, I think, yeah, like Jackie or something.
Yeah. Right, to beautify.
Yeah, to beautify. Or to refine. It could also be Edna, but
Somehow that doesn't sound like it is. Nothing against the name, some of these old fashioned
yeah,
names.
right. It could be that's where Edna comes from.
Funny how you just change a few letters around, it doesn't sound quite as beautiful.
Right. Okay. So, and how do we know this? V'nahar yotzei me'eden lahashkot et hagan. There's a cryptic statement that a river emanated from Eden to irrigate the Gan. So it seems, even from the verse itself, even though we normally just, gloss over it and we say, okay, a river starts in the middle of the garden and it irrigates the vegetation. That's how you normally understand it. But you see from the verse itself that there's a differentiation between Eden and Gan. Tamtzit kor tarkev shoteh. So, and the Gemara gives sort of like an analogy. The vessel that you would use to irrigate a core, which is a large amount of acreage, it's like a few acres of farmland property, you would need a large vessel to bring water to that area. Let's say like a huge wheelbarrow, okay? And let's say you can, when you pour out the water after you finished irrigating the garden, there's always a little bit of water left in the wheelbarrow. And you could use that leftover to irrigate a tar cave, which is a much smaller piece of property. So a tar cave is an amount, is 1/60th of a core of farmland, this much smaller piece of property. Tamtzit kush mitzrayim shota. And furthermore, the amount of water that is required to irrigate Ethiopia, which is the land of Kush, is when you are left over with, the droplets of water that are left over in the container after irrigating Ethiopia, you could use to irrigate Egypt. So what does that even mean? We don't even understand what that means, but apparently it's a metaphor to describe how one is 1/60th of the other. Kush, apparently in the African continent, Kush has greater spiritual potential than Mitzrayim does. Mitzrayim is a land of tumah, of depravity, which is devoid of spiritual energy. So therefore, the analogy is, and I don't know why specifically Kush, the only thing we know about, at least perhaps the spiritual energy of Kush, is King Solomon's wife Sheba came from Kush. And therefore, it had a certain kind of spiritual quality that Shlomo was able to recognize. And that's why he married the queen of Sheba. Now, you look at Ethiopia today, it's nothing remarkable, if anything.
That's what Haile Selassie, the emperor of Ethiopia, tried to claim. I think he claimed he was lost tribe or something like that.
Yeah.
There was a whole to do about that.
Yeah.
But not much came of it.
Yeah. So, but it is interesting, isn't it, that a group of Jews remained in Ethiopia, in the African continent, for all these years, faithful to Judaism, and eventually found their way back to Eretz Yisrael. So I'm not sure, but certainly you can find more quality in Kush, 60 times more quality in Kush than you find in Egypt. Nimseit omer Mitzrayim mahalech 40 yom, Kush mahalech 6 shanim va'od. It turns out that if the span of Egypt is 60 is 1/60th of the land of Cush, then the span of Egypt, it takes 40 days to walk from one end of Egypt to the other. 40 days. So therefore multiply that by 60. And you've got 40, what's 2,400, right? So that's a little bit more than 6 years. 2,400 divided by 365. Divided by 365 is 6.5 years. 6.5 years. So it takes you 6.5 years to traverse the entire span of Cush, the land of Cush. And we know that the land of Cush, Egypt, Ethiopia, is which one is bigger as a country? Is Egypt bigger or Ethiopia? You think so? Hey Siri. Which country is larger, Egypt or Ethiopia?
Stop.
Chat says Kingdom of Kush was powerful 1400
Egypt is around the same size as Ethiopia. As a matter of fact, they have an illustration. They superimpose Ethiopia over Egypt, and they're almost, they're different shapes, but they're the same. They're the same size.
We couldn't answer that.
Okay.
So I looked up what Kush is. Kush is located in present-day Sudan.
Sudan.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Kingdom of Kush was a powerful 1400-year-old ancient Nubian civilization, 1070 BCE to 350 CE, which is a little bit later than ours. But anyway, located in present-day Sudan, as a dominant trade power, it produced gold spanned from Kerma.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe ancient Ethiopia is a combination of Sudan and Ethiopia. Let's see. Let me ask chat. Are you looking in Chat GPT?
I just did no, it said probably Gemini because I'm asking Google.
Okay. The ancient civilization and nation of Kush, where is it today in Africa?
Great question. The ancient civilization of Kush was located in what is today Sudan, along the Nile River, just south of Egypt. So it was a really significant power, especially during the first millennium BCE, and its legacy is still felt in Sudan today.
Is Ethiopia included in that empire?
Yeah, that's a great point. Ethiopia and Kush were closely linked, especially in later periods. The Kingdom of Kush was sometimes referred to as the Nubian region, and at times it extended southward, overlapping with areas of what we now think of as northern Ethiopia. So they were definitely interconnected, culturally and politically.
Why does the Jerusalem Talmud say that the ancient civilization of Kush was 40 times larger than Egypt?
That's a fascinating mention. So the Jerusalem Talmud sometimes uses these huge comparative numbers to express a biblical or mythical grandeur, kind of like a poetic way of saying Cush was vast or mighty. It's not necessarily a precise historical measurement, but more a way of emphasizing the power or expanse of the Kushite Empire and their narrative world.
Wow. Technology is incredible. It's pretty, I think we still need the rabbi, but that's impressive.
Yeah, thank
you. Impressive.
Okay.
Just the conversational style now is quite phenomenal. Really behind in this technology.
I have a new girlfriend. Yeah.
We won't tell the rabbis.
Yeah, okay. Okay. So let us now go. We're going back to the thickness of the rakia. We're going to see now that there's a machlokes as to the actual thickness of the rakia. How thick is the rakia, gentlemen? Same thickness as the planet Earth, right? It would take 50 years to walk the breadth of the rakia, the thickness of the rakia. V'Rabbanan Amrin, And the Chachamim say, Kishnei Avos Harishonim, that the thickness of the rakia is like the years of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, which, when you put all of their years together, you get approximately 500 years. How do we get that? Because Avraham lives 175 years, Yitzchak lives 180 years, and Yaakov lives 147 years. You get 502. It's 502. So what the Gemara is essentially saying is that there's a machlokas between the previous opinion and the opinion of these chachamim. Previous opinion is that the thickness of the rakia is only 50 years walking distance. The chachamim are of the opinion that it's 500 years walking distance, the same span as what the sun has to traverse over the course of the day in the celestial realm. Okay? As it says, Kimei hashamayim al haaretz. As it says that your days will increase, your days and the days of your children will increase upon the earth that God had promised to give to them. Kimei hashamayim al haaretz, like the days of the heavens upon the earth. So the way that the Gemara is understanding this pasuk is we will have elongation of days like our ancestors did, because Laman Yerbu Yemechem Vimei V'nechem, your days and your children's days. So your days is a reference to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov collectively, and their children will also have that span of days. And that is how long is that span of days? Like the days of the heaven upon the earth, which means that it's a distance of 500 years walking distance. So therefore, the Gemara seems to be saying that I'm not sure where you get Kimei Hashemayim al haaretz. I guess just like the rakia is al haaretz, the rakia dome is upon the earth, so its thickness is also that 500-year distance of the amount of time that Avram through Yaakov lived. Okay, it's a very difficult way of understanding the psukim. I guess we'll have to hold it here for today, and we'll continue this discussion of the different opinions about the thickness of the rakia. Have a great day, everybody.
What's our schedule going forward?
So we'll learn tomorrow. Obviously we're taking a break over Yantif, and I'm thinking we'll take a break over Chol HaMoed as well, because I've been asked, I'm not sure if I will be needed, but I've been asked tentatively to give the Daf Yomi over the last days when Rabbi Rothbart will be away. So I may end up just sharing that, but I think that what I prefer to do is just take a break over Chol HaMoed, and we'll resume right after Pesach, the day after Pesach, okay? So, but we're on for tomorrow morning.
Say that Tzipporah was a Kushite?
Yes. Tzipporah was a Kushite, al ha'isha kushita asher lakach. Very good.
That as well.
Yes.
See, that shows a greatness